It's a rare opportunity. It's a rare opportunity to have the ability to talk about scholarly issues outside very narrow academic circles. So this is for the merit of the River Delminian. So kudos. So a little bit about what I do. So besides the things you just heard, when it comes to scholarly work, my focus, my interest is about the meeting place of Judaism, of Orthodoxy specifically, and modern values. My first book that was published by Routledge in 2014, I think, that was my dissertation from Bar Ilan, dealt with what I believe is the most prominent halachic revolution of the modern period, which is women's Torah study. That book dealt with the way rabbinic leaders thought and interpreted canonical texts about women's education, and how many of them completely reread texts because modernity brought to their footsteps a major change in the way the world society is approached. The second book deals with another avenue in which Judaism, Orthodoxy specifically, meets modernity, and that's politics. This book, which I finished finally, took 7 years to finish. It was finished in the past 2 months. It is now under review in an academic press. There were 2 academic presses which are interested in it, and one of them is now reviewing it. So I hope it will be printed in 2023. And that book is touching on a point which Jewish historians are interested specifically in modern Jewish history, took for granted. And what do I mean by that? You see, Jewish politics is a very complex term. It has a lot of baggage. When I say Jewish politics, sometimes the first thing people think, okay, people are fighting in Shul. I'm sure you don't have that in Riverdale, but here in Pomona we have it. Now, that is Jewish politics, but it's not modern Jewish politics. You see, modern Jewish politics, something special about it. When historians started to talk about modern Jewish politics, they wanted to exclude an older model. What was that older model? The classic idea of Jewish politics in the Middle Ages, in the late Middle Ages, and maybe even to a degree in the early modern period, was Jews live in a community. This community in the Middle Ages is outside the political structure. Jews are either totally foreign. They could be, in Spain, for example, they could be the property of the monarch. To a degree, they could be, that's one model suggested by historians. There are other models also discussed by historians. Point is, Jews, in the best case example, in Germany, for example, when they need political representation, what is the model? The model is the Shtadlan. What is the Shtadlan? In modern Hebrew, it's translated as lobbyist. In the medieval period, that would be the court Jew. It's usually a wealthy Jew, maybe someone who is in very intimate financial relationship with the political ruler. And what does that court Jew do? He represents the needs of the Jewish community. And that's Jewish politics. But modern Jewish politics, that's different. Modern Jewish politics, and by the way, is everybody hearing me okay, or should I? That's great, thank you. So modern Jewish politics is different. See, modern Jewish politics takes Jews and puts them in the modern political system. Now, I'm gonna go through, half a dozen books and several academic courses now in 2 minutes. There are different models for this. Some Jews, their interest to modern politics is within non-Jewish political structures. For others, there are unique political Jewish organizations. First and foremost, Zionism. It's not the only one, by the way. It's one form of modern Jewish politics, but there are others. The Bund, for example. Now, just went through half a dozen books in a minute and a half, because I want to get to what interests me. And that's Orthodox politics, modern Orthodox politics. And here I'm going to tell you what I did, what I'm doing in this book, which goes counter to what many, many historians, including all my teachers in Bar Ilan through the years, were teaching. If you look at the classical work of the study of Jewish politics, Orthodox politics is categorized in a very, very specific way. How? As a modern invention of the Shtadlan. Specifically in post-Second World War Israel, if you look at the prime example, Agudat Israel, it is portrayed by scholars, for a very good reason, as a body which has only one goal: to represent the needs of the Jewish Orthodox community, specifically the Haredi community, to protect its needs, and have very little interest, maybe none at all, in the larger questions of modern Israel. That is how scholars represent Agudat Israel and other Haredi parties. To a degree, this is also the language that was used by scholars to describe the national religious parties, Hamizrahi, Apol Hamizrahi, and their later, when they later morphed into Mafdal. The Solomon movement is a slightly more complex issue. We're not going to deal with it. What I'm doing in this book is saying that while it's true that to a degree, the Agudat Israel establishment and the Mizrahi mainly, less Apol Mizrahi, but definitely Mizrahi, that definitely had these elements of Shtadlanut. There were forces, there were groups within Sam, you muted me for I get a mistake.
That was a mistake. Go continue, please.
Okay. So what I'm doing in this book, which again goes counter to what was said up to now, is that within interwar Jewish Orthodoxy, political Orthodoxy, there were actually modern, maybe even ultra-modern examples. And I focus on Jewish Orthodox socialism. In the past 7 years, I uncovered a large group of Jewish intellectuals and who were also political leaders in interwar Poland. Some of them closer to Aguda, some of them closer to Apol Mizrahi, again, a certain spectrum, that were all descendants of Hasidic, well, they were mostly affiliated with Gur, with the Gerei Hasidim. Some of them were very much still part of it. Some of them were a little bit, went through some process of modernization, but they were definitely all coming from a Hasidic background. And they created, through several texts, they were all prolific writers, by the way, and I have a big trove of documents, of primary texts, and they said that their interpretation of rabbinic literature, their commitment to Yiddishkeit demands that they will be socialists. Now that I find fascinating. These are people that are saying that you had Jewish religious socialists in Israel. You had example in Apol Mizrahi of people that said we're socialists and we're religious Jews. But if you look at the prime ideological examples, the late Moshe Una, for example, and a few others, some of them said clearly, my socialism and my Judaism are separate. My religious obligations do not mandate my socialism. That comes from a different place. But what I found is people that are saying, no, my Judaism, my Orthodox Judaism, mandates that I would be a socialist. In other words, and this is almost a direct quote, they're saying the same way I bench Lulav and Etrog on Sukkot, I need to make sure that there is mandatory healthcare for workers and that there's paid sick leave. And this is a direct quote from the Yiddish original. Now, in the next 15 minutes, because 20 minutes, because I do want to leave room for questions, and I thank you all for coming in a late night, and I don't want to too much jump your time. What I want to tell you a little bit is about who are these main figures I'm talking about. So the person that lays down the ground for this is probably the only name, maybe it might ring a bell with some of you. Yehuda Leib Orlean. Why would it ring a bell? Because in the interwar period and afterwards, he became somewhat of an important figure in Haredi historiography. And in some Haredi cities in Israel, there are streets named after him. Interestingly enough, in the Haredi hagiography that was written about him, his socialist chapter is totally not mentioned. So why is he important in the story of the Haredi society? Because he was the heir to a very famous woman, Sarah Schneer. After Sarah Schneer created Bes Yaakov, in order to take it to the next level and to make it a national organization in Poland, German Jews came, Dr. Leo Deutschlander and some others, they brought in money from Frankfurt, made it into a national organization, and at a certain point they understood you need someone local to take care of it. Sarah Schneer passed away, and when she passed away, one of the people that were already involved was Yehuda Leib Orlean, and that's what made him famous. He is the person that was the leader of the movement and a very popular figure in Poland in the 1930s. But before he became the leader of Bet Yaakov, he was one of the major leaders of Po'alei Agudat Israel, a major faction within Aguda. And what was that faction all about? Well, depending who you asked. If you asked the leaders of Agudat Israel, they wanted to have a special section in the movement for religious proletarians, because they wanted to make sure they're not going to go and start asking questions and maybe going to look at the secular parties, maybe even the Bund. They were worried about that. Orlean and others said, no, we're not here for that. We're here because we believe that our religious commitments do not only require us to eat kosher and to keep Shabbos, but also to have a socialist society, no more and no less. Now, Orlean knew that what he's saying is very controversial. And through his career, there was one thing that he cared about, which was to make sure, absolutely sure, that Orthodoxy remains united. And if that means he needs to maybe not say things he believes, he'll do that. Because the most important thing is Jewish unity, and specifically Orthodox unity. But if you carve really, really, really carefully, you can see that he's laying the ground for a Orthodox interpretation of socialism. We don't have a lot of time, so I'm just going to give you the big ones. First and foremost, Orlean is saying private property, is a construct of society, not of the Torah. In other words, the Torah recognizes societies of private property, but the Torah can also handle, and according to Orlean, will even celebrate a society without private property. This is a religious man saying that. This is not just a religious man. This is a person that will become one of the most important educators in interwar Poland. This is, again, a person that is today highlighted in Haredi historiography as a major protector of Haredi identity. And he was saying in the 1920s that, you know what, in a perfect world, there shouldn't be private property. In a perfect world, there should be no private property. Now, the next big thing. This man, all these Jews I'm going to talk about, the Orlean and others I'll mention later, when you try to check where are they getting their ideas from, it becomes immediately clear that these young men, they read a lot. And their sources of information, clearly the first and foremost text that they are reading and they're contemplating and they're critiquing is Karl Marx. But the bombshell is that they're not rejecting Karl Marx, they're reading him critically. And by that, I mean, some of his ideas they like. Now, first, the idea they like is the fact that they like his idea of historical determinism. They like the idea that he says history is moving towards a communist society. They like that idea. Why? Probably because it has some religious echoes. Society is moving towards, towards redemption, towards this perfect future. Now, there's still, but the thing is this, Marx says a lot more. Things which are extremely difficult for a religious ear to handle. So how are they dealing with other Marxist tenets? Now, the biggest issue for Orlean is how do you say Marx has a point when this Karl Marx says it's legitimate to have a revolution and it's legitimate to have a violent revolution? And Karl Marx, by the way, when he talks about violence, he's not mincing words. He's talking about French Revolution, the terror years. He says it's okay if we go and chop off heads. How does a religious person deal with that? And by the way, this is not unique for Orlean. It's true for a long line of religious people, not Jews also, in Europe in the 20th century that were asking the same question. There were different answers. Orlean comes up with a very original answer. He says, we need a revolution. But guess what? It's not going to be a violent revolution. It's going to be a spiritual revolution. History is moving forward, and what we need to do as religious Jews is promulgate a spiritual change among people that will bring them to, number one, understand that it's impossible to be a religious Jew, a person that keeps Shabbos and at the same time exploit workers. That's impossible. Second thing, to teach people, and remember, he will later become the most influential religious educator in Poland. The second thing is to teach Jews that materialism is bad. He actually writes a series of articles in Yiddish talking about how Jews in Poland are succumbed by what he calls the Luxuskultur, consumerism. That's how I translated it, the Luxuskultur, consumerism. Now, I have 10 minutes, so I'm going to jump. So Orlean, he's not as methodical. I just gave you two highlights of his ideology, but and there are other things. The point is, he was not methodical. Now, part of the fact is, okay, he was a very busy man. He was doing quite a lot of things. Another thing is, as I said, for him, the most important issue is Orthodox unity. And if Orthodox unity demands him shutting up about socialism, that's what he'll do. And he did. But he laid the ground. The next major ideologue I'm writing about is his student, his disciple, Label Fromm. He, when Orléans decided to leave politics and go into education full time, Fuchs is already a very popular young man in the Polyglot Israel circles. And he is pushing an agenda. He's pushing an agenda for Jewish socialism. Again, from religious socialism. He, unlike Orléans, he also is interested in Jewish unity, but he also says, you know what, I'm not going to bow down too much to the establishment. And he's talking about what he believes. So again, two highlights because we don't have more time. What does he believe in? He says, I believe in social democracy. Now, social democracy in interwar Poland does not mean the same thing that it means today in the United States right now. Okay, right now when we use in modern terms social democracy, we think about Scandinavian socialism, we think about the labor movement in the UK. No, social democracy in interwar Poland is actually referring to an ideology promoted in Germany by Edward Bernstein, a very famous German Jewish politician. And that is a much more militant view. It says no to violent revolution. It says yes to a gradual process of nationalization of modes of production that will end over a long period of time with the abrogation of private property. And Fuchs is saying this is what we need. How do we do that? Through education. We're going to teach our Jewish community that consumerism is bad. We're going to teach them that to be from Jews, you cannot keep Shabbos, but at the same time pay starving wages to your workers. And we will work for unionization. And Fuchs is saying, if need be, I'll even cooperate with the general union. Now, is it likely that the Polish unions will take Jews in? No, it's not likely. Okay, major problem for Jews. They were discriminated as not only as poor Jews, as proletariats, they were also discriminated on national grounds. So, but he's saying we need to unionize. We need to push for on the union level, and we need to support government nationalization of modes of production. And the end game should be the abrogation of private property. Again, I took a 35-page paper chapter and talked 6 minutes about it, but I think I gave you a good idea about how innovative this person was, how revolutionary he was. This man is saying in the Orthodox newspapers in Yiddish in Poland in the interwar period, I want socialism. I want social democracy. I think Soviet Union is horrible. I think Marx made many mistakes, but I want social democracy. And everybody knows what that means. Abrogation of private property, strong government control of modes of production with the hope of one day society owning all modes of production and a very, very centralized economy. Major limits on private property. Part and parcel, Fuchs is also saying we as Jews need to support the forces of peace. He's highly critical of the Zionist right, highly critical. And he is also saying we need, and that's bringing me to the next phase. He also says we need to think about the Jewish future. Now, 1920s, 1930s Poland, question of the Jewish future, they're not dreaming will come in 39 and 40. What they are thinking about is the fact that Jews are discriminated against in a systematic way in Poland of the interwar period. So he's saying, what about the Jewish future? Orléans, he didn't believe Zionism will work. He thought, okay, there'll be a small Jewish, maybe some kind of a small Jewish community in Poland, in Eretz Yisrael, will probably be dominated by the secular Zionists. The future of the Jews is still in the diaspora. He doesn't believe that that's where the future is going to be. Well, he's trying to think, you know what? The Yishuv, the Yishuv Chadash, the new Yishuv, it's actually going somewhere. So, you know what? We need to have focus there and there, there and here. He believes Poland is here to stay. He didn't think that almost 2 million Jews are going to disappear very soon. Now, some people in that group, in the left part of Parag Israel, they were saying, you know what? No, you need to be much more aggressive. You need to be much more aggressive about the Yishuv. Those people created a group. And that's the next chapter in my book. It's a group of people that created a party, short-lived party, called Dat Ve'avodah, Religion and Labor. Started by a group of people that left the Poland Mizrahi for not being socialist enough, and leaving Poland Israel for not being Zionist enough. And they're creating a party that says, we want a socialist model society in Eretz Yisrael. To do that, we're going to work with the labor movement, with the secular labor movement, staunchly secular. But we will work with them because the future is in Eretz Yisrael, the future is in socialism, and we as religious Jews need to be there. Now, these people, there's several of them. The most prolific among them is a very interesting man who actually spends most of his life in New York, in the Lower East Side. His name is Avram Bick. Those of you who are aficionados of Eastern European history, Bick is a very important family name, some very important Hasidic rabbis. Generally speaking, the Bick family held the position of the rabbis of Mezhibur. And this man, Avram Bick, is a descendant of that family. Before he come, now his grandfather, they come to the U.S. They become rabbis. His grandfather in Rhode Island, his father in New York. He goes to Yerushalayim, and he goes to learn no more, no less in Merkaz Harav of Fuchs Yeshiva. The way he tells it, Rav Kook liked him. Rav Tzvi Yehuda Kook, Rav Kook's senior son, wrote some nice letters to him. Now, this Avram Bick is a prolific writer. He writes a lot. For him, writing is like breathing. He writes nonstop. He is also a very interesting figure. How interesting? Well, let's just say this. He is, in the 1950s, he is summoned to DC to be interviewed by the House Committee for Un-American Activities. Senator McCarthy's committee invites him, interrogates him, humiliates him publicly. He is portrayed as an example of the infiltration of communism into the US, into the synagogues. The Jewish community is rattled by this, by the way, and quickly makes clear that he's not part of the system. I promise, Sam, Shmuel, I'm gonna leave time for questions. So just, I'm gonna tell you.
A few more minutes, don't worry, no rush. Few minutes.
So I'm gonna tell you a little bit about this, what this Avram Bick is saying. Avram Bick is on the more extreme level of that Avodah. He is not shy about saying, I like Marx. I don't like everything. I don't like the Soviet persecution of religion, but I think this Marxist idea is what religion really wants. This perfect world where everybody has everything and nobody's starving and everybody's happy because they have what they need. And he says, you know what? You should, and he's a rare example because he is a person that's saying, you know what? As far as the revolution, if there'll be some violence in the revolution, so be it. Sometimes you need to do it. He's trying to explain halakhically how that's possible. He does a very poor job, by the way. That's some not very impressive argumentation, but he's trying to do it. He's not the only one, by the way. He's really influenced by Nachman Steinberg, Yitzhak Nachman Steinberg, a very peculiar man himself, religious Jew who was the Minister of Justice in the first democratic Russian government after the 1917 revolution. He was the leader in the Social Democratic Russian Party, the Mensheviks. He's a person that was an ally of the Social Democratic forces, a person that took part as a military officer in the revolution and the crushing of the Tsarist movements. And he sits in the government with Lenin, by the way. When Lenin takes over after the second revolution, he leaves Russia quickly, becomes a territorialist, wants to have a second Jewish state somewhere else besides Israel. Very interesting man. And he is influencing. That Avodah really looks up to him. And Big, like him, says, you know what? Revolution is a good thing. And if you need to do some violence, you know what? It's a form of self-defense. And he says, we need to make it clear that a person that believes that private property is allowed by the Torah in the long run is a Karaite. The Torah is moving towards a future without private property. And the Jewish future will be to create in Eretz Israel a Jewish state that will be a socialist state. And Big says, I think we need to work. I know they're secular and I know they believe in nothing, but they believe in creating a Jewish state, and that's good enough for me. That they believe in Jewish state that we're socialist, that's good enough for me. He is not as charitable towards Jabotinsky and the Zionist right, not even a little bit. But what he does do is create a very clear, because he's really well read, he read a lot of political philosophy, very influenced by, again, certain contemporary figures, Neo-Kantian Hermann Cohen, Edward Ben Stoll, but mainly Hermann Cohen really was his source of influence, and some neo-Freudian forces that were at the time. And he is creating texts which are coherent and concise. They create this kind of a full panoramic view of, again, a Jewish socialist narrative. I'm not saying it's politically astute or realistic, but it's clear. It is, there's actually a political argument there. And that, and I passed the time that was allowed to me, so I'm just gonna now maybe circle back and put everything together. So what I found was this. What I found is a clear example of an orthodox political groups which are in a dialogue with contemporary political ideology, socialism, not as a rhetorical exercise, not as apologetics, an actual attempt to reinterpret Karl Marx and Edward Bernstein from a religious perspective. That means that the casting of Jewish politics, Orthodox politics, by the academic establishment as some kind of, again, this one thing, this homogenous modern Stadtland movement, that is inaccurate. It does exist in some parts of Orthodox politics, but it's not everything. What it means is, and this book, I believe, next to Naomi Zeidman's book from University of Toronto that published a book 2 years ago about Beis Yaakov, they tell a different story of Orthodoxy. Orthodoxy, unlike what the classical historiography of Jews in modern times portray them, they were not homogenous. They were not monolithic. There was actually a much more vibrant spectrum of ideological ideas. And again, Naomi Zeiman's book, and I believe my book, are telling that story. It's a much, much, much more diverse map, much more diverse than classic historians of like Dinur and Ber and others gave credit to. And point, and maybe the last point is this. When you look at the way religious politics is portrayed in the post-war period, specific in which the religious political movements are always cast, not only by politicians, but also by academics, as staunchly right-wing, inherently right-wing. What this book is saying, you know what? It seems that in reality, the political reality in Israel, which is portrayed as inherently, that inherently religious parties are right-wing, is not necessarily true. And it has more to do with the rejection of religion and religious values and religious voters by the rhetoric of the left-wing parties, rather than anything inherent. And these are examples, again, and these are clear examples that show that there was a dialogue in the interwar period, and a very successful dialogue at that. So what I'm leaving you with is the fact that the orthodoxy in the interwar period is different than orthodoxy after the war. Is the orthodoxy in Israel after the war is indeed much more monolithic, much more homogenous. But it was a mistake to describe orthodoxy in the interwar period and before that using that image. Many Israeli historians superimposed orthodoxy in the post-war period on orthodoxy in the interwar period. And this book explores why that is a mistake. So I went 7 minutes beyond what I promised Sam, so my apologies, but we still have time for some questions, right, Sam?
Great. Yes. So thank you, Ilan, for this wonderful presentation and also for giving us a nice taste of what a published book by you is going to look like. We look forward to hear. So when it's published, please let us know, and we'll happily let people know about it. So thank you so much for sharing with us this nice, intimate online group, the inside of your book. So please feel free to ask any questions. You can ask Ilan directly because we are a nice group, or you can put it in the chat. And yeah, please feel free to ask any questions you like.
Maybe ask an obvious question, which is you said that the politics has obviously changed, and not just in Israel. I guess if you drive around in the New York City area, it doesn't look like a rejection of luxus culture and private properties, what people nowadays believe in. So, why did these people fail to convince the broader Orthodox community, at least for the long term, about the ideas?
That's an excellent question, and that's my last chapter deals with mainly that question. Where did it go? Where did it disappear? So let's begin with the easy answer: the Holocaust. Almost everybody I'm talking about perished, and except for that Avodah, they didn't have enough of a structure, enough of a stronghold in the Yishuv. Poalei Agudat Israel in the Yishuv, in pre-state Israel, is an independent party. It's independent. It has the same name as the movement in Poland, but it's independent in every way, shape, and form. And this group in Israel, in pre-state Israel, is not socialist. They are here to protect the rights of religious workers. They want to negotiate on their behalf with the secular labor union, with the Istadlut, but they're not into socialism. They're into protecting the rights of the religious workers, and also to represent the needs of those Jews that are coming from Poland and Germany, the more modern or neo-Orthodox people that are coming in the third and fourth aliyah, mainly the fourth aliyah, the aliyah revi'it, that's what they're there for. Socialism is not their thing. They want to cooperate with the issue, but they think, you know what, if one day the revisionists are in power, we're also good with that. We're not into socialism. We're here to protect our rights. Basically, they're saying something which is true. You can be a conservative politician and also have a vision of workers' rights. Okay, there are conservative visions of workers' rights. In Parag Israel, the president at the time was a rabbi from Germany, a descendant, a grandson of Hirsch, of Boyer, and he writes a very interesting short book about workers' rights, according to, again, from a conservative point of view. Now, that's the first thing. Most of these people are killed, but it's not the only thing. The second thing is this: the Israeli establishment is dominated by the left, by Mapai and other left-wing parties up until 1977. The Zionist movement after Herzl is dominated by religious, the Zionist labor movement, which is staunchly secular. And they have a political narrative. A political narrative comes from ideologues like Boho, like others. It is it's staunchly Zionist, staunchly explains why, even according to socialist points of view, even Marxist point of view, there's still a legitimacy for a nation state for Jews. But when it comes to religion, it has a very, 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 very short fuse. And that, I believe, is the issue. In other words, and that language never changed. And it actually became more and more extreme. Now, what I finished the book with is the fact is that it's clear, according to contemporary Israeli demography, that if the Israeli left ever wants, ever dreams of ever regaining any kind of political power, I don't know if you, for example, you see the polls from the past 2 weeks, but it's pretty abysmal for the Israeli left. I mean, the labor movement started by David Ben-Gurion is on the verge of disappearing as a political party in Israel. According to the polls from the past week, they are right now with 4 mandates. That's below that, they're out. You can't be a party with 3 mandates in Israel anymore. Now, if they ever want to have any kind, they need to go to the biggest voting bloc in Israel, which is the religious vote, be it Haredi vote or the Tilomi vote. If you don't have part of that, then it is most likely over. And the political reality of Israel, it's pretty clear that this is where it is. And that, I believe, is the second issue. I don't know how to weigh which one was bigger, but these two things, that I think is what explains the disappearance of the religious left and disappearance of any kind of political dialogue between the left and the left-wing parties in Israel.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you, Adam, for this very important question. Anybody else have any questions? Okay. Going once, going twice. Okay, so Ilan, thank you so much again for joining us this evening. We are excited also to share with you that we have our next class will be on November 29th by Rabbi Daniel Friedman. We don't have the topic confirmed yet, but we're very excited to host him as well. And then we're going to have one next couple of months. So please look out for the upcoming classes throughout the year. If you have any ideas, please feel free to reach out to us. We're an active committee of many people who are involved. Without further ado, so again, thank you so much, everyone, for participating tonight. Thank you, Ilan, again. And hopefully next time we'll invite you also as the deputy mayor of Pomona. And unless you become the mayor one day. So
the next election is in March, so yeah. But
okay,
I will tell you this: just market is hot. So if you, I mean, I love Riverdale, but you know what? If you want trees, we have them.
Very good. Okay, good night, everyone. Thank you so much
Good night.
for participating. Thank you so much. All the best. Bye-bye.